Okay, everyone, so now we're going to move on to natural resources. So we're going to go over some terms. I'm going to go over oil. Of course, oil is a major commodity here in the Middle East, though it is not the number one country in the world for oil production is not in North Africa and the Middle East, and I'll explain why. So here are different types of resources. So make sure you do review this slide here, okay, and make sure, of course, that you go over all these terms here, but I'm going to explain them, okay? And again, don't worry about this because, again, I don't use this textbook anymore, okay? Just maybe because it costs a lot. So, natural resources means anything that's in the ground, okay? So we refer to natural resources, anything that is within the Earth's surface, okay? Whether it be renewable or non-renewable, okay? Non-renewable means once the resource is gone, it's gone. It cannot be replenished, okay? Good examples are oil, coal, okay, gold, copper, etc. Okay? Those right there are non-renewable resources, okay? Then you have renewable resources, meaning that they can be reused, but it really depends on the resource, okay? And you can break it down further to perpetual, potential, renewable. Perpetual means it's inexhaustible, meaning that it can be used over and over again. So the sun, okay, that's perpetual, it's inexhaustible. You could argue the wind, that's why some people like to use wind energy, because again, it's inexhaustible. Same thing with waves, okay, from the ocean. And then also geothermal, meaning that's plant over a fault line that produces energy. Potentially renewable means that it can be renewable if taken care of and if replenished by humans. So potentially renewable has to be replenished by humans. Perpetual does not. Okay, that's why I say it's inexhaustible. So when people say, well, water is a potential renewable, it is. But again, what if the water runs out, or what if a river dries up? Humans then have to be able to, replace it. Or what if the river gets polluted? Same thing with plants, okay, like trees and that. People say, well, trees, can be, but again, you have to replant them, once they are gone. So just make sure you understand those terms from specific examples I just gave. And remember these examples too that I also have, okay? Okay, reserves, okay? What is the definition of a reserve? Reserve means is where there is a known area of a resource, a known area of a resource. So when we say oil reserves in Weld County, we're saying we know where there are specific, areas that have oil present, okay? So when we say the one thing you need to look at though is there's a lot of factors that go on into extracting a natural resource, okay? You have to have the money to do it. It costs a lot of money to get everything. It even costs money to do, wind power, okay? So again, you have to look at the economic conditions. Do you have the money to do it, okay? I'm going to use oil here in Weld County. That's what most of us are familiar with. Does a company have the money to do it? Okay? They do. Okay? So like Noble, PDC, Halliburton, etc., they do. Is the technology available to do it too? That's another factor you have to look at, okay? And again, it's not just drilling, but then what about for the wells, okay, which use, solar power and also wind power to do oil extraction, okay? And then the question is, okay, what about the usage rate? Like how much in demand is it? Demand is low, do we want to extract? If demand is high, then we want to extract oil, okay? Another factor would be process of the getting the oil. Like what is it? And you have to follow regulations. Obviously here in Weld County, okay, we do have to follow some regulations. We do have to look at, where can we access the oil, and then what do we do to keep it going? Again, as I said before, not only do they use electricity, they also use solar power and wind power to extract oil, okay? And then again, not just cost of getting it, but what about, human cost, the dangers of doing it? What about, employee salaries, benefits, etc.? So a lot goes into it, okay, when you're extracting it, okay? Now, obviously I put this up here because it's kind of a, straightforward answer, but the biggest natural resource in North Africa, Middle East is oil, as I said, okay? But here's the question, though. Has oil's always been an important commodity? It is not, okay? For most of human history, oil was just seen as, the sludge coming up from the earth. It didn't become important until the Industrial Revolution, okay? It was not until the Industrial Revolution that oil became very important. Now, how is oil created natural process? Well, this actually even goes into a little bit of physical geography, and I will be teaching this in my physical geography classes coming in my physical geography class. I talk about this with one of my labs, actually. It's created when you actually have, a lot of rocks in that, and there's a carbon output, and that actually creates oil, okay? It actually goes back to one of the rock types, okay? I don't want to go into too much because that's more for physical geography. Now, oil has not always been found underground, okay? In the earliest stages of the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s and the early 1800s, oil was mainly found through whaling, okay? You probably read the book Moby Dick, okay? Good book, okay? But again, that's how oil was found, was mainly through whaling, okay? Now, I'm going to show you guys right here, okay, the map here. Now, what's interesting is that in terms of oil production, you can clearly see we are the largest country in terms of oil production right now, okay? So we do have the highest production in the world, okay? It was Saudi Arabia for a while, but then we became the largest producer once again, okay? Saudi Arabia, though, does dominate within North Africa and the Middle East. There's no denying that Saudi Arabia dominates, okay? Other countries do too, but Saudi Arabia is dominant. And then the other question is, who dominates in consumption? Well, we do, okay? We dominate in consumption. Again, you can see this is a little outdated here with this chart because it's showing the United States is not, okay? It's showing Saudi Arabia. Again, we actually are outdoing Saudi Arabia. Our production, though, has not really changed, although China has gone up a little bit, okay, to like 15%. So here's what I want you guys to do, okay? I'm going to show you the question right here. Sorry if you hear my cat. He's being furball right now, as I like to call him. For question number 2, why is the United States the largest consumer of oil in our globalized world? I want you to analyze our consumption of oil for automobiles and finished products, whether it be, say, plastics or medical devices, etc. Okay, do they rely on oil? Just give me 2 factors for part 1. Why is the United States the largest consumer of oil? For part 2, though, okay, we're using this chart right here. Give me 2 factors. Do you think the People's Republic of China in the next 20 or 30 years will become the largest consumer of oil? Now, I want you guys to not think about current events, okay? We're just going to, look at it from an overall perspective, long term. Now, one thing I want to emphasize too, a lot of people say, well, China has a lot of renewable resources. Not as much as you think they are, okay? China is an industrial power. China has a lot of factories, okay? Think about the usage of automobiles as automobile usage increased dramatically, okay? Think of all the roads in China. In fact, China, right now is at the same level as the United States in terms of roads, and it's actually going to increase. So really think about that, okay? So I will then pause. I will then go ahead and stop the video here and go ahead and answer those 2 questions. Okay, so you answered the questions. We're now going to do spatial diffusion in other terms, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and define these, give examples. We talk about spatial diffusion, it means like, where is it spread out, okay? When we talk about a cultural hearth, that is where a cultural aspect began, okay? So let me give you an example. We say that the cultural hearth for Christianity is Israel. That is where Christianity started. It can be other things too. Let's say, the cultural hearth for video games, okay, modern video games. That'd be Japan, right? So again, it can be many things that a cultural hearth is. Expansion diffusion, I'll go back to hierarchical, but expansion diffusion means is that the cultural aspect spread out from where it began. So when we say that Christianity spread to Europe and it spread to Russia, the Western Hemisphere, that'd be expansion diffusion. If we were to say, well, the video game culture spread to the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, Europe, and it has, okay, you can get Nintendo anywhere, PlayStation or Xbox, whichever you like. That would also be an expansion diffusion. Hierarchical diffusion means it starts where there's very few people and goes where there's, starts where there's many people, and goes where there's very few people. So it goes in increments. Now, I want to emphasize, too, that I know a lot of books say that it starts where there's a lot of people and a very few people. That's where I was correcting myself at the beginning. It can go the opposite direction, okay? And I've actually even did a paper on this in grad school. So it can go in the opposite direction. You'll see what I mean here when I explain it, okay? So hierarchical diffusion is probably the hardest. As I said, it's where a lot of people are, and then it goes down where there's very few people, okay? So like for instance, this would be New York City, then the suburbs, then the exurbs, and then very rural areas, okay? Let's say like a popular cultural phenomenon, okay? Like in the 80s, it was the Walkmans, okay? So Walkmans were in New York, then they went to the suburbs, and then they went there, and then of course went to very rural areas. Again, I know I'm dating myself with that. But again, it can go the opposite, where it starts in a rural area and goes to the big cities. One popular cultural aspect I can think of would be country music, okay? Where it started in rural areas and now it goes up all the urban areas. Even New York City has a country music station, okay? You wouldn't have thought of that in the 80s, but they do actually, okay? And yeah, expansion diffusion is very straightforward. The spread of Islam is definitely an example of expansion diffusion because, again, began the cultural hearth of Saudi Arabia, okay? Again, other aspects also started in Israel too, but again, Mecca is very important. So it started here, okay, and spread throughout North Africa. Again, I'm going to talk to you about the Arab invasion going back to Sub-Saharan Africa, Central Asia, okay, India, and of course Southeast Asia. So again, spread out from where it began. So that's why it's an example of expansion diffusion, okay? So we'll do languages of the realm now. Okay, very straightforward. So we're going to look at which family does Arabic belong to, which Middle Eastern countries do not have Arabic as a language, and does Israel have Arabic as an official language. Now clearly you can see that, here, okay, one family dominates with the exceptions of Turkey, okay, and Iran and Afghanistan, okay. And the major family is Afro-Asiatic, okay. So again, this includes the Arabic language, okay? So predominantly the Arabic language. This dominates here in this portion of the world. Again, start in the Arabian Peninsula, and then of course you have the Arab invasion of 600s when they colonized North Africa, okay? Now, what are the exceptions? Well, Turkey's one, okay? Turkish is a different language, okay? That was actually started by Mr. Kemal there after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Iran is also an exception too. Farsi is the language, okay? Farsi, as spoken by the predominant Persian ethnicity. And in Israel, Hebrew is the dominant language there. Hebrew is, okay? However, Arabic is also an official language in Israel. In fact, in Israel, roadsides are in 3 languages: Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Okay, so that's why I say that, Israel is pretty unique, but also it's got a big world tourism, so that's why in those 3 languages there, okay? Okay, I'm going to stop it here because I do have to talk a lot about the 3 major Western religions. Okay, so go ahead and take a pause. I'm going to stop here and be sure that you do review all the notes.